Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Today's disc review, we are taking a look at the Dynasty from Infinite Discs. When it comes to the profile of the Dynasty, it has a very steep shoulder. I mean, it gets to its almost highest point right away on the shoulder, but as you move across the flight plate, it is fairly flat. However, near the injection point in the middle of the flight plate, it does have a little bit of a bump, but still overall, with that flat flight plate, even with that steep shoulder, it still gives the Dynasty a very slim feel in the hand. Which that slimness really makes the Dynasty feel very, very good when it comes to forehand, and with that steep shoulder, it actually does make it feel pretty comfortable for backhand grips as well. For the flight numbers, you see it there, speed 9, glide 5, turn -1, and a fade of 2. And as a slower arm speed player, I was actually impressed that those numbers are pretty spot on for my arm speed. When thrown with a generous amount of hyzer, that's exactly what the Dynasty does. It holds that arcing hyzer without too much flip up, again, giving it a generous amount of hyzer. But when you do throw it with just a slight amount of hyzer, you're going to get this really nice pop up to flat. It's going to hold really, really straight before at the very end of the flight, that final quarter of the flight, it's going to have a pretty predictable finish. And since it does hold straight on these hyzer flips, you can anticipate that and throw it down tunnels and gaps where you have to hold straight down a tunnel and then still have a little bit of a hyzer finish at the end of the tunnel. Once you do start throwing the Dynasty on that flat angle, I really wasn't noticing a whole lot of turn, at least in the earlier part of the flight. Instead, it started out pretty straight, and then as it got about 2/3 of the way, that's when I started to notice it had a little bit of a pan, a little bit of a turn, before then as it slows down, it has that predictable finish. But this is a disc that is fairly neutral, at least at the earlier parts of the flight. That resistance, that high speed torque is good, but not great. So it can be manipulated early on in the flight, when once you do start putting it on that little bit of like an anhyzer angle, it's going to hold that angle for a good chunk of the flight. But depending on the height or what your arm speed is, it may try to at least level itself out, and then just at the very end of the flight, as you're seeing here on these more extreme anhyzer angles, it is trying to fight out. It holds this extreme angle pretty far, and then at the very end here, it checks up and still hyzers back, which does allow you to try to hyzer around an object. If say you're in the woods, or for shot shaping capabilities, this is a great disc to use on wooded courses, because you can put it on so many different angles and just know it's going to hold for a while and then it's going to fight back. And when it comes to forehand, you know, the Dynasty is a very solid option. I mentioned earlier about the profile feel, how it works really well for those forehand grips. Well, also because it has good torque resistance, again, not great, but good torque resistance early in the flight. You can throw it on hyzer flips that are going to ride very, very straight, throw them flat to get a little bit of an easy flex, or even start throwing it on those anhyzer lines and get some big flex shots. In fact, both backhand and forehand, it really holds very similar lines to each other, and to be honest, that can sometimes be hard to find a disc that does that. Now, out on the course, I love the Dynasty for those kind of slight hyzers that you know is going to have a nice finish at the end. Again, I mentioned those kind of tunnels and gaps, great for holding straight and then just hyzering out when you need it, but also flex forehands. Yep, I can get it to kind of flex around an object, kind of shape that fairway, and know it's going to have a nice finish out. And it does decently in the wind. It definitely straightens itself out, doesn't have as much fade, but you're not really risking fully turning over until you start getting into those more 10 to maybe 15 miles an hour. And when it comes to plastic, it definitely comes in a wide variety. I unfortunately only had it in the S and C blend, but it also comes in other premium plastics as well as baseline or semi-baseline, so that way you can really find the one that matches the shot that you are looking for. Now, in the C line blend, this one, I think it holds up a little bit better in the earlier part of the flight than the S blend that I have, and maybe it has just a little bit tick more of a finish, but it's definitely something that I can pump more into. I can really trust it on more exaggerated anhyzer lines, and when I do throw it flat, it's going to check up just a little bit sooner than the S blend. So definitely like the S blend more for backhand and the C blend more for forehand. Okay, on to the lefty lines, and for the S blend Dynasty, you can see it rides out pretty straight. Maybe the slightest bit of turn, again 2/3 of the way down its flight before then it has a good finish, versus the C blend just has this really nice, it doesn't really like deviate off its line until the very end of the flight where it checks up and has a very stable finish. And then you have the trail from MVP, which has a little bit more flip in the middle part of the flight than either the S or C blend Dynasties. And then you have the Undertaker from Discraft, which very closely resembles the Dynasty's flight, but I think it maybe just has a little bit more turn, kind of similar to that of the trail, but it has a little bit harder of a finish. Overall, if you are a fan of, say, the Undertaker from Discraft, I really think the Dynasty is a great option for you. It's going to be very similar flight, pretty straight when thrown flat, maybe just a little bit of a turn, but then a nice predictable finish. The trail from MVP, at least this trail that I had, was a little bit flippier than the original runs that came out, so I'll have to try the two side by side because this trail was a bit flippier than I had expected. My previous experience with the trail was more in line with the Dynasty, at least in the earlier parts of the flight, just a little bit less fade at the very end. So overall, the Dynasty is a great fairway driver and will be a great addition to anyone's bag. It is very, very straight. It has a decent predictable finish at the very end. It holds up all right when it comes to the wind, but also holds up pretty well to forehand. It's both comfortable forehand and backhand. Just overall, a solid fairway driver that I absolutely would recommend. Well, thank you all so much for watching. Please be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Also, visit GreatLakesDisc.com for your disc buying needs. And until the next time, everyone, keep banging chains.